Okay, 2017, thank you for staying with us. And looking at the latest numbers from the IEBC's website, the number of rejected votes now stands at 79,353. And what we are reporting is from 9,405 polling stations out of the 40,883. We have a team at the Bomas of Kenya who are looking at the results as they trickle in. In studio, we have Lorna Irungu, who's a communication strategist. We have Kamotho Waiganjo, who's a constitutional lawyer, and Felix Owuor as well, who's the electoral law expert. Thank you for staying with us. Kamotho, let me begin with you. The number of rejected votes now stands at 79,353. What are your thoughts about that number?
I think the good thing is that they seem to be coming down, which is a good thing. I think there was a time they were about 4-point-something%. They're now about just below 3%. It is still a very high number for a very technological election, you know, because the more manual an election is, the more you expect spurt votes. So it raises a question about, the voter education process. Yeah. If there's something we didn't invest in this time, is a voter education process. And I think it's someone who mentioned earlier that the voter education process needs to be continuous. It can't just wait for election day, because a lot of the mistakes that are happening are just the sort of typical normal mistakes that people make. Either you mark two candidates by crossing one and ticking the other. There were quite a number of those. Put him in the wrong ballot box. I think there were quite a number of those. So it is not that the voter did not express a choice. It is not a voter who came not intending to express a choice. That voter expressed a choice, but because of the process, that choice did not find itself in the ultimate vote. And that is not fair. You know, it actually is an affront to the democratic process. So it is something that we need to look at. Any time that you have spoiled ballots above 1% of the votes, there is something fundamentally wrong. So it is something that our failure to invest resources in voter education, the failure to invest, we did a lot of campaigning. You know, there was very effective campaigning. But in terms of then telling the voter, now that we have agreed that X is going to be your candidate, how do you translate that choice on the ballot box? There was a lot less of that done. So that's a failure on our part, and I think that needs to happen if we are not going to have this sort of numbers. Is it a failure on our part, or is it a failure on IEBC? Lorna?
Part of it, I would say it's a combination of factors. It is, for IEBC, institution building is critical. And now that we know, and I think this election has proven that from here on forth, we're going to have a lot more people on the ballot. I was surprised by how many candidates there were. And I don't think that number is going to go down the next set of elections. I think we're only going to either stick to this level or keep getting more. And part of the challenge, and I agree with him about the fact that voter education and just the whole civic education, we only work on civic education literally a month or two. In fact, let's say weeks, because you can count them down, before an election. This needs to be an ongoing process. We need to consistently remind people about citizenry and what your role as a citizen is. So coming out to cast your vote is one of the things you have to do. Knowing who your candidates are, showing up for debates, interrogating these people. As of this morning, the people were like, who am I voting for MCA? I mean, and I'm thinking...
You decide whether or not you wanted to go 6Ps or
yeah,
whatever.
Exactly. But part of the challenge is that your MCA, for example, is your most important person you're going to elect today. Yes, we can say the president and all those important, but in terms of impacting your life wherever you live, it's going to be a member of county assembly. They're the ones who pass the bill for wherever you are. And then everyone else kind of follows in tune. So part of the challenge is, I think, in terms of civic education, voter education, I agree with him 100%. These things need to happen. We have too much talk about candidates. But then it makes no sense for the candidate if you're not going to get elected.
Felix?
It's extremely high, actually. And you would want to imagine that the 2017 being the second election after the passage of the new constitution, that the numbers of rejected ballots would have reduced, because this is the time that we actually experiencing voting for 6 different elective offices at the same time. Civic education or voter education started much late this time around. But I also want, looking at the numbers as we're seeing them being projected, one can't help but draw a parallel with the 2013 elections, when soon after transmission of results or display of results began at Bomas, it emerged that the numbers of the rejected ballots was giving the top two candidates almost a run for their money, and that they rejected. In fact, there was the narrative then was that the rejected, but the spoiled ballots was number 3 in that contest. The question that I would have, I'm asking myself is, what is the procedure, what is the protocol of resolution or reconciliation of these results? What we are seeing, unfortunately, is just the totals. The totals. And maybe at Bomas, they probably have the benefit of observing different results being displayed at the same time. But if we are seated here and all that we are seeing is, numbers being, adding up and rejected ballots adding up, then a number of questions, of course, come. The parallel with 2013 being one of them. What is the protocol or the process and the procedure of reconciling these ballots? And clearly, from the results that we are seeing, and I'm sure we'll be able to talk about them, what I'm seeing also is that the results transmission mission seems to be skipping an extremely important step,
and
that is the constituency tallying center, because these results are coming from the polling stations. But the law is clear, the constitution is clear, the ruling by the Court of Appeal is clear that the procedure for the reconciliation of presidential ballots must begin at the polling station, Form 34A, to the constituency tallying center, Form 34B, and then to the national center. But what we are seeing, so I'm asking myself, are we having the total picture here? But I guess that's a conversation that we can have.
And I think part of that is one of the challenges of the law that was passed last year, because that law anticipated that Bomas would be, the election amendment law anticipated that the National Tally Center would be the port of call for the presidential elections in total. So what it then provided is that you'd have provisional results from polling stations sent electronically directly to the National Tally Center. Now, the assumption then was that they would then, in fact, at some point, probably even be able to announce a provisional result for the presidential election. But you see, they can't do that, because even if they have these provisional results from the polling stations, until the final results from the constituencies are declared, even if they have the numbers, those numbers don't mean anything. So there's a confusion that was brought about by the law as was passed and the decision of the Court of Appeal. And that is what the Commission is struggling with, because on the one hand, they must display, the law actually requires an open public portal where those results are being displayed.
We're actually seeing it here.
But those results are provisional. The National Tally Center has no legal capacity to declare presidential results as final results. So they still have to wait for the constituency results. But I think the earlier we get the final results from the constituencies, that's the only time that people can start signing off and saying X has won or X has lost. It's still very early in the day.
And I think that's a good point, Trace, but also look at the fact that as we are sharing these numbers, the mood is being created, okay?
Yes, yeah.
And what you have said is critical, but it needs to be repeated that these results are provisional, that the final results will come. And I think I like the idea of provisional results, partly because of what we're talking about earlier, communication.
It's true.
There needs to be constant, we need to kind of start seeing the numbers as they come up and as they're coming, so that people can go back and check, did this constituency actually have this at these voting stations? I like this idea for accountability purposes. So then we don't have an issue of someone coming and saying, but us guys voted in X person and it wasn't counted. Yeah.
So would it make sense, of course IBC is scrapped of that periodic announcement of the results. Would it make a difference for you?
I think it is. I think part of what we're doing now is tracking and confirmation of that tracking. If there is an issue that comes up, you can come back and say, hold up, at 8:30 p.m., these were the numbers from these polling stations. If this constituency has 30,000 polling stations and the first 10, we are now waiting only for 20. It's not a case where we are waiting for all 30. So I like the idea, but I think we need to remind people that they're provisional.
But even with that, the procedure for announcing that result must be as accountable and as transparent as possible. And I'm not saying it isn't. I'm not saying it isn't. You would have expected a situation, say, for example, the way they do it in South Africa, where at the National Tallying Center in Pretoria, all the results of the 9 provinces are listed, are displayed publicly. and then there is one national results for the whole country. If a polling station in Western Cape transmits the results, it automatically updates the column for Western Cape province and the national talent
So you can
center.
see where the source is
the
coming
numbers are
from.
coming in.
But what we are having here is, just numbers keep popping up.
Yeah, because even on social media, guys are saying, tell us where these numbers are coming from.
Exactly. That is it. And which is why the Court of Appeal decision, knowing the mischief of the previous elections, then affirmed the finality of the vote at the constituency level. Yes. And by doing that, it presumed and presupposed that it went through verification and the tallying processes at that level. That is why, with respect to the presidential elections, it is final at the constituency level. And so there ought to have been a better display and a better accountability that if Mombasa County posts, we would be seeing a polling station in Mombasa County as posted
this,
and then it updates the national, so you can follow, you can track. But with these figures coming in, unfortunately defeats the accountability that the Constitution contemplated.
And maybe the question goes to the media and election observers, right? I think this is the highest number of observers we've had in an election.
And high profile.
And not just observers, but high profile observers. 5,000 observers. That means each county roughly should have what? 20, at least at the very minimum. And so my question is, from the observer's side of view, from the media side of view, is it possible to just make sure that you're tracking this for accountability purposes? That we are starting to say, in Mombasa, instead of just talking to someone at one polling station, is saying how many of these results are from this particular constituency. And I think that's going to be the way to keep the public really just feeling at ease, Someone has started saying, but they're only counting votes from one region, or they're only saying this, and they're just giving us numbers and kind of scaring people.
So what are we supposed to be doing now to just ease that?
I think right now it's part of, just to add on to what he said, we know these numbers are coming from polling stations. They're not necessarily all coming from the constituency level. Can we, in these constituencies where these numbers have been coming in, because we know some places have finished, some places have counted, come back and say, how many constituencies are there in Mombasa? Out of the counties that are kind of bringing in these numbers, which constituencies are those? How many specifics? Because we know the number of constituencies we have across the country. And then we can start tracking, because then whoever the presiding officer is of that constituency, you have access, you can be able to verify that these results are coming in from that point. I think that would be that would be a tracker, because you have people on the ground. So that's a tracker method we put in place and say, guys, if you're a reporter, you are in Starehe constituency, they have counted 5 of the polling stations. Tell us which 5. Your job now is to tell us these votes have come from
We'll try and give you as specific.
So that if Jirongo has 8,000 here, you can pinpoint where the 8,000 has come from.
Yes.
Where did these 8,000 come from?
Which polling stations did 8,000 come from?
Okay.
But the way we are doing it, unfortunately, will foment a lot of anxiety for no reason. And we've had a very, very improved process. Since morning, the voting process has gone on very well. And the last challenge of results management, this is really where we lose it.
Okay.
And IEBC has the information, because that information is coming from
somewhere.
So they need to avail it. And they don't even need to give the specific polling stations. Give us aggregated in constituency. That gives you an indication of where that information is coming from. And Linda, before we move, there's an issue that Lorna raised, which we never discussed, about the role of people called observers. I think that's a conversation we need to have, because I don't even
trust me, I'm having that conversation
other
with
than
you.
coming on holiday for many people, there's actually not a lot of work that goes in terms of actually making an impact on a better electoral process.
We're talking about observers in a few minutes. Allow me to take a break. You're watching Kivumbi2017. Thank you for staying with us. Let me take that breather now. We'll be back.
KTN News, your official election station.
Our law works.